Now, why should I keep on forgiving somebody? That's the question of what Christ did next. Answers the question why a person should forgive somebody who hurt them, like the mother of the doctor. Why should I forgive my mother for 2.5 pages of wounds? I don't know what you think his answer is going to be. Maybe you think it's going to be because God forgave you. It's not. Jesus Christ gave the shocking answer why a person who understands this will forgive everyone from now on, once they understand it. So what Christ did is what he frequently loved to do. He made up a story called a parable. This wasn't a real story. It was a fictional story. And he put in that story the answer to why a person should forgive 70 times 7, and put it in the middle of the story, and it carried it along. And the zinger, the part that is the point of the story, doesn't happen till the end of the story. But let's take a look at it. So in verse 22, I do not say to you 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Therefore, okay, now he's going to tell them a story that answers the question, why should I forgive 70 times 7? Therefore, the kingdom of heaven, how heaven works with earth. The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents, a big fortune. But as he was not able to pay the king, his master commanded that he be sold to pay off the debt, and his wife be sold to pay off the debt, and the children to pay off the debt, and all that he had, that payment may be made. Whoa, the servant is traumatized. He doesn't argue that he owes it. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. The truth of it is, he couldn't pay it all. The amount of money that there is impossible to pay off. The master of that servant was moved with compassion. Whoa. Why? Because he fell down on his knees and was begging. And he responded with compassion. You see somebody begging right in front of you on their knees? I did this once. Not for something that I had done to the man, but in which another man had done to that man, and he wouldn't forgive. And this was a big thing, and God was going to judge him severely for not forgiving him. I, with 5 other men, spent the day with this man at his request. And at the end, I was so fearful because he wasn't going to forgive and was going to sue the man, that I got on my knees in front of him in my office. I literally got out of my chair, I got on my knees, I grabbed his knees, and I said, Bobby, I beg you to forgive that man. And I was so moved, I was weeping. I said, let me be the man, and let me apologize to you for him. Please forgive him. When that happened, that broke my friend Bobby's heart, and he forgave. When a person humbles themselves like that, it can powerfully impact you. Have compassion. Then his master, verse 27, of that servant was moved with compassion. Now look at these words. Released him. Whoa. He released him. And then, after he released him, he forgave him the debt. So there's 2 separate parts here. You release the person and you forgive the debt. But that servant who was forgiven went out and found one of his fellow servants, probably a person who worked with him or for him, who owed him 100 denarii, not very much money. And he laid hands on him, and he took him by the throat, saying, Pay me what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay you all, because he probably could have. But he would not. He would not let him have the time, but went and threw him into prison till he should pay the debt. So, when his fellow servants, who were watching all this, who saw the first man beg at the king's feet and got forgiveness, went over to the other person who owed him a little bit and threw him into prison, they saw this, they were very grieved. They were upset. And they came and told the king, the master, all that had been done. Then his master, oh boy, after he had called him, said to him, You wicked servant. Do you realize unforgiveness is wicked? Whoa. The last person you didn't forgive, you were wicked. That repositions it, doesn't it? I forgave you all that debt because you begged me. Should you, now look at this, should you not also have had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you? Now here's the question. What's the king going to do now? And his master, the king, was angry and delivered him, now underline this, to the torturers. For how long? Until he should pay all that was due him. Now here's the zinger. Here's the point of the parable. This is the shocking part. Jesus now pulls back the veil between heaven and earth and lets all of us find out what the kingdom of heaven does to somebody on the kingdom of earth when they will not forgive. And it's not good news. So, said Jesus, just like the king threw him to the torturers until he paid all that was due him, so my heavenly Father will do to you, what's that? Throw you to be tortured. If each of you, underline these next three words, from his heart does not forgive his brother, another human being, his trespasses, the things he did wrong against you. Do you realize what Jesus revealed? That as the king threw the man to the torturers, listen carefully, he didn't throw that man to prison. He threw him to people that would torture him until the torture continues. Listen, the torture continues until that is paid off. Then Jesus gives the answer. Peter, you want to know why you should forgive 70 times 7? Because if you don't forgive, my Father will do that to you. He will deliver you to the torturers. For how long, Jesus? Until you forgive the person for every single thing he did that hurt you. You mean I get torture until I forgive? Yes, you do. And just imagine if you have 2 people that you don't forgive, and 3 people, and 4 people, and 10 people. And that's why life doesn't make sense. We don't understand the torture that comes from things emotionally, physically, financially, relationally, could be related all the way back because the Father said, nope, she won't forgive. Let's encourage her to forgive by sending her to be tortured all this time, and then she doesn't forgive another person, the torture increases. Then the person prays for that, asks people to fast for that, and it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because we didn't connect it. That's still going on. And here's a person who couldn't believe in Jesus because they didn't believe and didn't forgive their mother. Just imagine what's happening in your life. So let's make some points about this as we get into this session. Number 1, God desires that everyone forgives everyone for everything. Number 2, God describes people who don't forgive as wicked. As wicked. Therefore, if I don't forgive you, I am wicked. Point number 3, God delivers everyone who chooses not to forgive to the torturers. I want you to understand something. God doesn't torture you. Look here. God doesn't torture you. God delivers you to the torturers. God doesn't do that. And I want to make a real point here. God doesn't want to deliver you to the torturers. It gives him that you won't forgive. So there are 2 exceptions to this that I want you to understand. Exception number 1 is the window of grace. The window of grace. What is the window of grace? When a traumatic hits you that you can barely cope with, it's so painful and traumatic, God gives you a season of grace to cope with that and then forgive. He gives you some time. I don't know how long he gives us, but he does give us some time. I've had a couple times in my life where the wounds were so severe to me that I actually asked the Father, would you give me some time to cope? I will forgive. And had peace, and then forgave. There was no delivery to the torturers. Don't ask for 10 years. Number two, exception two, the season of childhood. You and I know about the traumas of childhood. All of us in this room have had various wounds from parents, from relatives when we were young, and we couldn't cope with the wounds that happened to us. What does God do? God postpones the torturers in a child's life because they are innocent until a period of time passes and they cross a barrier. We don't know when that barrier is. It's different for every child by their maturity, in which God then convicts them. Okay, I want you to forgive what he did to you. And you'll know it. You'll feel it. And you'll be convicted you should. And depending upon what you do there, changes the next period of your life, because it'll bring it about to you again. There is that series of innocence that he says, I won't judge you for this, but when you pass that innocent period where you can make up your own mind now, I'm going to invite you and tell you it's time to forgive this person. If you don't, that's when the torture begins. Make sense? Number four, God is not abusive. That's my big fear of session one, that you will misunderstand the heart of God. God does not want you to be delivered to the tortures. But he has little tolerance for the sin of unforgiveness. Little tolerance for it. We'll talk about later on today why God has little tolerance for this. Point number five. You probably are wondering, what does it mean to be tortured? That comes from a Greek word. As you may know, the Old Testament in the Bible was originally written in Hebrew, and we translated into the language that we're from, like this is English. And the New Testament is written in mostly Greek. And therefore, when people like myself who've studied hard and learned some about Greek and some about Hebrew, I always want to know myself, what's the Greek word behind torture literally mean? I wanted to know, what does it mean? And the word is basanizo, B-A-S-A-N-I-Z-O. That's the Greek word, basanizo. I then took that Greek word and I looked all through the New Testament for every place basanizo was, and saw what was taking place so that I knew what could happen to me if I don't forgive. Because this is what will happen to me. I'll be thrown to those people who do this to me, who tortured me. And I didn't include all of them on your notes, but I included many of them underneath this. Point five, to torture means to cause another person distress and suffering. Torture is always suffering, but suffering takes different forms. So I've given you 4 verses that have basanizo in it. Matthew 8 says, when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a city, a centurion, the leader, came to him, pleading with him, saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home, paralyzed, dreadfully tormented. Well, that's physical, isn't it? That's basanizo. So that can happen. Do you know how many people are physically ill because of unforgiveness? And when they forgive, they are healed. And when you have a physical illness directly related to a major sin of unforgiveness, no matter what you do, you will not be healed. Because the cause of that sickness is unforgiveness. That's why so many Christians lose faith in God over this, because they don't understand. They said, God can heal. I want to be healed. I have faith to be healed. And then they pray and they get their friends and God doesn't heal. Well, there may be a number of reasons why he doesn't. But after 40 years around the world, I'm utterly convinced the number one reason he doesn't is because it's a judgment of being tormented, because the person will not forgive and they are acting as a wicked person. Does this make sense to you? Good. Second verse, 2 Peter chapter 2. And delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked, for that righteous man, dwelling among them, tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds. What is that? That's emotional suffering. Emotional suffering. Then Revelation 12:2. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain, that's basanidzo, to give birth. And probably the most serious one that I found was in Revelation 20 at the end of the age, when the devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Look up here so you hear this sentence very clearly. Not all suffering, physical, mental, emotional, financial, relational, is from the sin of unforgiveness. But having talked to psychologists and psychiatrists and done a great deal of research, it appears a safe guess would be between 60 and 80% of all of that is related to unforgiveness. One of the classics ever written about this was by a secular man who did research and found out that 92% of everybody that are in a mental institution, 92%, would be released if they forgave other people. But they would not. Number 6, the torturers apply discipline. The torturers apply discipline until forgiveness is fully granted. What happens when you forgive? The contract is ended. The father says, that's enough. They finally did what was right. No more torture. Number 7, circle this one, put it in red. Fear of the torturers is Christ's reason to forgive without limit. Christ, why do you want me to forgive? Because you don't want to be tortured, do you? Good. The basics of forgiveness is part number 2. And I want to quickly help you understand this. And I'm going to use a physical illustration and a heart illustration. Let's say that last week I fell down at the game park and I got a big cut in here. And we had a physician on the game park, and let's say he came and cleaned out the wound. And what would happen in about a week or 2? It'd heal itself. The doctor doesn't heal anything. They can't heal it. They have no power to heal it. They just want to get it ready so the body can heal itself. That's because how God made the body. But what would happen if he missed a bunch of dirt way down deep inside of it? And he put stitches in it. What began to happen to that wound? It become infection. Then it become real sore. And let's say that I just saw this man here today and he didn't know I had an infected sore here, and he said to me, hey, how are you doing? What would I do? Watch this now. I would overreact. And he would wonder, what did he do wrong? This happens with unforgiveness all the time. Where you do something or say something to somebody and they overreact, and you said, where did that come from? Something going on inside that wasn't even related to you. If I do not take care of this, soon I'll have a line down here. And I'll get a little bit of a temperature. Then my head will begin to become a little cloudy. Then I'll start to get a big temperature. And I could eventually, if I left this alone, that infection could spread everywhere in me. But if I go back to the doctor and say, oh, there's something wrong in here, he cleans it up and takes it out, what happens to the wound? It heals up. It may take a little longer this time. And in a month, when I see this man and he says to me, how's he doing? He goes like this. Guess what? I won't even feel it. Wait, I won't even feel it. Wait, I won't even remember it. Now apply that to forgiveness, because forgiveness doesn't take place in your arm. Where does it take place in? And guess what? It's hidden. You can't see it. And when somebody hurts me, whether they're intentional or unintentional, where is my wound? It's not in my head. It's not in my will. It's not in my big toe. Where is it? It's in my heart. And if I clean it out and make sure there's no unforgiveness in that wound, guess what happens to the wound? And it just grows and it heals. It heals by itself. And I don't have anything there except a scar that I don't even feel. And the next time I see you, I don't think about what you did because it's already healed. But if I have unforgiveness, that's the dirt. And as it becomes infected, then it starts affecting my emotions. And I start not trusting you anymore. And I start wondering, well, you acted like him. Maybe I shouldn't trust you anymore. And then I become afraid about what she may do to me. And I have new fears and anxious thoughts. And then at nighttime, I get a terrible nightmare about you. Wait, it gets much worse than that, doesn't it? And until you go back and realize I have wounds that are real, and they're still there. And until you clean out the dirt called unforgiveness, your heart will never heal. And if these wounds are long-standing like this lady, man, she was a hard woman. No man wanted her. She was hard. She was angry. She was filled with infection from her heart. I didn't know who the woman was when I met her. It wasn't until she forgave and her face changed and her heart opened, because she had walls so high nobody could get in, and she was afraid of everybody. And I'm hurting you so you can't hurt me. And when she forgave for the first time, she found out who she was. And I liked her. But I didn't like, whoa, I had to love her, but I didn't like her. I liked her. It's different, isn't it? So could it be you've never found out how you really are? And all that torment. So let's see if we can't sketch that out. Is this helping and making sense this morning? So we left the blank there because I want you to draw this yourself. And here's the first thing that happens.